Shrimad Bhagavad Gita Chapter 5 verse number 23. As it goes with all other verses that I have so far embarked and interpreted in the light of Shrimad Bhagavad Gita, each and every single word appears to be immutable, timeless. Its relevance, its light is beyond the limitations of the time. The kind of indelible impression it has been able to cast upon my understanding is beyond explanation. This particular verse, the moment I tried to understand it, I was absolutely stuck over here. The word is Sharir Vimokshanat. The moment I relinquish my body, of course, yes, death. It talks about death. We have come here in this sojourn. The enlightened ones term this life as a sojourn, which means that our stay, our existence in this limited period of time is here. It is transitory. We are not here to stay forever. We are here on a sojourn, a limited stay. There is within bracket from birth to death, entering into the womb of the mother and then perishing with this mortal remains, merging into the sky. It talks about the awareness of understanding that yes, this existence in this physical dimension has a limitation. In general parlance, when we are engrossed into the activities of our life, we are so entangled, our awareness, our attention is so immersed that the limited existence of this sojourn never comes to the surface of our attention. It's very seldom that when we come across certain moments when a thought surfaces that yes, we are here for a limited period of time, but otherwise we are absolutely oblivion to the fact that we are here just on a transitory move. We might bounce back once again, reincarnate, that's in the form of a rebirth, but yet it's all transitory. It's not here for permanent to stay. This understanding has been reinforced very forcefully in this particular verse. Sharir Vimokshanat. Sharir means this physical dimension. Vimokshanat, the moment it shall perish or we shall relinquish it. It's both the same. This particular verse makes a mention that a special assignment has to be dispensed. A special objective has to be accomplished before we relinquish this physical dimension. What is that assignment? That assignment itself is the objective of this life. What is the objective of this life? According to this verse, the drives, the humongous drives, the magnitude of such drives which is beyond. What are the drives? They are Kama, which is lust, Krodha, which is wrath. According to this verse, before we relinquish our physical dimension, one has to develop an inner immunity, an inner forbearance, that one can move unscathed from the gigantic drives, wild urges that arise within the human mental plane in the form of several cravings, yearnings, desires. Generally, I take two verses to be understood in a span of 30 days. It's therefore that we have this live classroom broadcast on every second and last Sunday of every month, for a special reason that each and every single verse needs a contemplation within our own mind. Shrimad Bhagavad Gita, this immutable encrypted knowledge, is not for mere reading. It's for contemplation. You have to immerse into it, find yourself in consonance with the prevailing times and your own situations, your own life, and then relate to it so that you're able to draw, extricate the real essence of the verse. It is therefore that we specifically choose to pick up only one verse at a given point of time and only two in a month. It requires at least a fortnight for one verse to be assimilated within our mind in order to produce an understanding in consonance with our prevailing times in our life. When I was understanding this particular verse, I was contemplating upon this. I also understood the same, that lust and wrath, they both have a role to play in our lives. How is it possible that we simply defy, evade the urges of desires, aspirations, yearnings and cravings? It's not possible. In the normal dispensation of the business of life, be it in profession, personal life, interpersonal relationships, as a citizenry or as a social person, it's not possible for us to say that we are totally closed when it comes to aspirations, yearning, craving or desires. It's really not possible. And when we give ourselves certain aspirations, yearning, craving or desires, it's bound to be there that an outcome of that in the form of some wrath on a pretext that whether we have been able to accomplish or when someone else has been not able to contribute to our accomplishment, it's bound to generate. These questions were simultaneously traveling in my mind when I was trying to understand this particular verse. According to the ancient Indian wisdom, there are 6 primal enemies to human evolution. The major ones are the lust, which means all kind of desires, aspirations, yearnings and craving, and the wrath, which is merely an outcome of the lust, that is greed, that is the craving, aspirations or desires. This wrath is an outcome whether you accomplish your desire or whether you remain inconclusive. Whether you remain inconclusive is understood, but how is it possible that wrath would also surface or abrupt even if you accomplish your desire? We'll have to understand those 6 enemies. Who are those 6? The mother and the father you have seen over here. Now let's talk about their family. The next one is greed. The next one is arrogance. The next one is jealousy. And the most important to be mentioned at the last is bias, moha. These 4 are the outcome of the parenting accomplished by Kam and Krodh. Even if you accomplish your desire, there is an element of greed that finds more extensions. Even if you accomplish a yearning, you have a possessiveness which leads to arrogance. And if you remain inconclusive, obviously this 5th enemy would erupt without any containment. And even if you accomplish or you remain inconclusive, the bias is bound to be there. So according to the ancient Indian wisdom, the outcome of the accomplishment or remaining inconclusive with a yearning, craving or a desire, wrath is bound to happen, and they both breed greed, arrogance, jealousy and bias. And one must be able to overcome the impact of the magnanimity of the urges that they project towards human understanding. Why? I was going through the interpretation which was scripted by one of the greatest yogi who was a direct disciple of Brahmrishi Yogiraj Lahari Mahashaya, Mr. Bhupendranath Sanyal. He was one of the direct disciples who scripted the interpretation that was bestowed by Lahari Mahashaya during his evening discourse upon Shrimad Bhagavad Gita. Thereupon he mentions that as the outcome of a disturbed mental currents, I am writing over here the mental currents. The movements, the turbulations at the level of the mind. The outcome of these mental currents comes towards the energy circuitry. I need to change the pen. Energy circuitry. This is manomay, this is pranamay. The movements at the surface of our mind or into the ocean of our mind, they produce further distortions that go and impact our energy circuitry of the body, which is pranamaya kosh. The aspirations, the yearnings, the cravings, they come and intervene to inject their impact into the pranamaya kosh, the energies into our body. And as an outcome, if the energy circuitry becomes contaminated, the mind is further propelled for destabilization and a vicious cycle starts. And for one to bail out of it becomes very difficult. And the process of mental currents leading to impact of contamination to energy circuitry, they further contributing to mental currents, it goes on from one life to another. One must be able to bail out of the vicious cycle. Only then the energy circuitry is able to render the prana towards evolution of a human being. This is what he mentions. According to the yogic anatomy, I must say, I'm taking liberty of using this word yogic anatomy. This is what happens when we become unregulated by the impacts of the Kam and the Krodh, the lust and the wrath. I was thinking as I started, I mentioned specifically that it takes me time to contemplate and try to find my place in consonance of my own practical life in the light of these immutable facts. I was trying to understand at my own end that engrossed into activities I cannot relinquish. I cannot come out of all my engrossments. I cannot simply evade all that I must be able to do, my necessary obligations. I have to get through with them. How do I manage? This question was all around. Does it mean to me that till the moment I shall remain engrossed in the dispensation of my necessary obligations, I shall remain to be confined or under the containment of this vicious cycle? And this question was again and again tormenting me. Does it mean that living an ordinary life is never going to extend me an opportunity through which I could evolve? When I was again and again asking myself this question, an intuitive understanding also surfaced beside. And then I started understanding, yes, of course, under the ancient Indian wisdom, we always seek wisdom, far-sighted wisdom. And this is the utmost blissful experience or a boon to human life. To be born, B-O-R-N-E, to be born with far-sighted wisdom. Because with far-sighted wisdom, one can develop an understanding to discriminate and discern between reasonableness of greed or the profit which is necessary for one to generate. It is easy for one, with the help of the far-sighted wisdom, with the luminosity of the far-sighted wisdom, to discern and discriminate between Atma-Samman, that is self-respect, and arrogance. With the light of far-sighted wisdom, it is easy for one to discern and discriminate between sportsman spirit, competitiveness, and jealousy. And at the same time, with the light of far-sighted wisdom, it becomes easy for one to discern and discriminate and judiciously draw a line between bias and responsibility, concern. One cannot take an excuse to relinquish one's concerns towards necessary obligations. At the same time, one has to be able to draw a line between bias and a concern, which means that the energy circuit, the energy circuitry, which becomes contaminated and gets thwarted and drained out by usage of these demonic, if channelized properly, leads towards more of courage, chivalry, forbearance, patience, wisdom, and whatnot. The moment the energy gets scattered, becomes a tool for several demeaning avenues. And the moment energy is channelized property, it leads towards evolution of pursuits, not only spiritual but also worldly. The essence of this particular verse merely does not shower light upon the spiritual pursuance, but at the same time, for all those people who have worldly objectives to be accomplished, it renders equal effulgence. And that's what I was able to conclude. It says absolutely perfect. Before one is able, or before one shall relinquish this physical dimension, no one knows when. No one has an idea about the last breath, when and where, and in what form. No one, except those enlightened ones who are there in some esoteric dimension. They are aware that the ones that we term as enlightened ones, exalted ones, not ordinary human beings living on this physical dimension, are aware about the last breath, where and how and in what form. It says very rightly, Kama Krododbhavam, one that arise out of the impacts of the drives, of the urges of the Kama and Krodha. One must be able to develop one's forbearance so that one can easily sail through unscathed while dispensing all necessary obligations. You see, according to ancient Indian wisdom, we understand and assign highest respect towards householders. Householders. Grahastha. We call it as Grahastha. I am writing it in English. Grahastha, which means a family, as a householder. the assignage of highest respect has been towards a grihastha, a householder. And it has been mentioned at several scriptures that a householder or a grihastha, it is the abode of highest levels of austerity one can practice. Highest levels of austerity can be practiced in the capacity of a householder. Why? Because subjections to the tormentations or the drives or the urges of Kam and Krodh and their family are at their optimum levels for a grihastha. Unlike a sage who is confined into a hermitage, in a recluse, cut off from the normal dispensation of the world, a grihastha, a householder, is directly in transaction and under the impact of all of these. In the capacity of a householder, if one is able to learn and understand and learn and practice how to remain unscathed, how to remain insulated, even while engrossing into direct interaction with the activities of the life, how to remain insulated from the impacts of Kama, Krodha, lust, wrath, greed, arrogance, jealousy and bias. It's not easy. That's not easy at all. That is why the assignage of highest reverence and respect towards a grihastha or a householder finds its mention in the ancient Indian scriptures. How is it possible that one can practice the insulation while engrossing into direct interactions with the business of life? I find that not only reiteration and one's connect with scripture of this kind enables one recall the purpose of one's being here in this sojourn. But at the same time, what is required the foremost is a constant, equitable vigilance. We all know what is good and what is bad, don't we? Yes, we know. All of us are very well aware of a fact that we are here on a sojourn. This abode is transitory. But do we remember it at all times? No, we become oblivion to that. We all remember that falling prey, P-R-E-Y, to the impact of lust, wrath, greed, arrogance, jealousy and bias is going to disturb the pursuit of our life. Don't we know that? Yes, we know. But yet, it's somewhere concealed at the back of our mind and finds its surface rarest of rare. What if this particular foremost objective of being here is recalled now, not once in a year or once in 5 years, but at all times? Constant equitable vigilance. If one is able to recall a day, basics will never change, let me tell you. Basics will never change, however mundane they appear, however ordinary they may appear, however unimportant they may become in a life, but basics will not change. And the basic is to recall a day, to recall a day, to recall a day in the form of a life each evening before we retire. The basics will not change. In order to maintain the constant equitable vigilance to all parts of our life, profession, personal, interpersonal, societal, etc., etc., spiritual evolutionary, growth in business, knowledge, etc., this constant equitable vigilance must prevail. And what would ensure that? The same basics. Recall a day in the form of a life Because a day is a drop of your life. So it is a symbol. It's a conclusive symbol of your life. A day is a hologram of your life. A day is a hologram of your life. You were breathing the day out. You're spending your attention, your time, your energies. A day is a hologram of your life. Why not to recall this hologram? How did it fare today? Where did it divert? How much justice was done to the primal objective of being here? I'm inching every day, every moment I'm inching towards Sharir Vimokshanat. To what extent was I able to accomplish that I must? To bear the impacts of the drives that are bound to come and impact my existence. This constant equitable vigilance cannot prevail unless we recall a day before we retire. Basics never change. And according to this verse, one who is able to accomplish, one who is able to develop an inner immunity of forbearance in the light of these contaminators is Sukhi Nara. Nara means human. It's not a gender. It's about human. Sukhi, the accomplished ones. One who has accomplished the purpose of being here. The purpose of being here is not accumulation, but accomplishment. The difference between accumulation and accomplishment: accumulations are going to stay here, not going to travel into some other abode. But accomplishments are. All those who are able to accomplish the primal objective of the life have been termed here as Sukhi Nara. The light of the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita is timeless, and it's for timeless Arjuna. Arjuna, the one in you and one in me, one who is capacitated, one who has large objectives to accomplish, yet in the clutches of delusion. This light comes as a streak, as a beacon for us to navigate unscathed towards the final objective for our being here at this sojourn. We'll meet in the next broadcast of the Life Classroom with the next verse of Shrimad Bhagavad Gita. Till then, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om.